From age to age. full page insert looks like this. If you did not get it from an usher, you might want to get that before the choir sings. You are part of the choir today. Now what we're doing is sort of an old-style Anglican chant, but updated with secular humanist words. And so, you're going to sing, your part is to sing the music at the top. I know the print is small, but the words are simple. Spirit affirms, the breath of life praises, the teachings live. Our way together is the way of life. And we will sing way of life the first time, second time, and third time. Then we'll sing way of joy. Then we'll sing way of life again. And then we'll sing pathway of peace, exactly as it looks on the page. Let's just sing the way of life. We'll sing that one time again. All right, I'll sing it first. Spirit affirms, the breath of life praises, the teachings live. Our way together is the way of life. Can you sing that with me? Spirit affirms, the breath of life praises, the teachings live. Our way together is the way of life. Very good. The choir will be singing with you, and I'll be standing right over there directing you like I do on All Music Sunday. All right, thank you so much for your attention. Look forward to worshiping with you.
And that musical introduction is our way of saying, hi-ho, and welcome to another Sunday here at First Unitarian Society, where independent thinkers gather in a safe, nurturing environment to explore issues of social, spiritual, and ethical significance as we try to make a difference in this world. I'm Steve Goldberg, a proud and incredibly charming member of this congregation, and like many of you, I'm absolutely thrilled that we can wear short sleeves today. I'm also thrilled to offer a special welcome to any guests, visitors, or newcomers. If this is your first time at First Unitarian Society, I think you'll find it's a special place. And we look forward to seeing you at our fellowship hour right after the service. Speaking of the service, this is the perfect time to silence those pesky electronic devices that you just won't need during the next hour. And while you're doing that, let me offer a couple announcements. First of all, Mother's Day, as you know, is a week from today. You might want to put that on your calendar if you haven't already. And Mother's Day is when we have our annual Peace Pole initiative here at First Unitarian Society, where poles get placed along our property on University Bay Drive. And we have an opportunity at 12:30 on Mother's Day, next Sunday, to experience and participate in a pole blessing with other members of the Madison Peace community who have been invited to participate as well. If you're interested, please see the sign-up sheet in the Commons at the welcome table or contact Roz Woodward. Another announcement, again relating to the calendar, beginning on the last Sunday of this month, which is May 26th, our summer worship schedule will just have one service each weekend, and that'll be Sundays at 10 a.m. So you can sleep in, and those of you who are watching at home can come in at 10 o'clock instead of just staying home to watch the service. Just a couple other announcements here. One is 41 days until Cabaret, Saturday, June 15, right here. It's game night here at First Unitarian Society, including games for men, women, and children of all ages, and we invite you to participate in that. Put that on your calendar. You can visit with members of our Cabaret team during the fellowship hour and see what opportunities there are to volunteer, what opportunities there are to donate auction items, and we're going to have a silent and a live auction. And our auctioneer this year is Steve Goldberg. I just talked to him this morning. He says he's really excited about Cabaret. And Cabaret is a special event. For many of us, Cabaret is one of the things that has drawn us to First Unitarian Society and made us happy to participate as members. So June 15, Saturday evening, right here, game night, the theme for this year's Cabaret. And the last announcement is that our stewardship campaign is about to pass the $1 million mark, and we're feeling good about that. Thank you, Drew. All right. Before I really derail us here, I'll just say thanks for your stewardship. There's room for more of that, and there's also room for a great service that I invite you to sit back and enjoy, because I know it will touch your heart, stir your spirit, and trigger one or two new thoughts. We're glad you're here.
Remaining standing for our opening words and the lighting of our chalice, Marilyn Sewell writes, "Come into this circle of love and justice. Come into this community where we can question and dream and believe in those dreams. Come into this holy space where we remember who we are and how we want to live. Come, let us worship together. As we spark our flame, I invite you to join me in our chalice lighting words, printed in your order of service, as together we say, "May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our will, and sustain our courage as we seek what is good within and around us." I invite you to turn towards each other and offer a friendly greeting.
I invite anyone who'd like to come forward for our message to come on down. Good morning, Liam. Hi. How are ya? You're like sliding in. Hello. Come on up. How are you? Good. Did you get outside yesterday? So sunny. You have no pants on. Me either. I don't have any pants on. Although I'm not going to lift up my skirt, I promise. I don't have any pants on either. How is everybody? Ooh, cool. Is that one of those ones where the legs go? Awesome. It'll go all over, right? Well, a little bit later, hi everybody. A little bit later in the service, Doug and I are going to be talking about the guides in our life, people and times that have helped shape us and help us find our way in this world. And when we started thinking about this, I thought about this book called Thank You, Mr. Falker. Do you know this book? It is written by Patricia Polacco, and it is a book about her life. And inside on the front, she has this picture, and it says, "To George Felker, the real Mr. Falker, you will forever be my hero." So this is a true story about a teacher in her life and how he really made a difference. The grandpa held the jar of honey so that all the family could see, then dipped a ladle into it and drizzled honey on the cover of a small book. The little girl had just turned 5. "Stand up," he cooed. "I did this for your mother, your uncles, your older brother, and now you." He handed the book to her. "Taste." She dipped her finger into the honey and put it in her mouth. "What is the taste?" her grandma asked. "Sweet," she answered. Then all the family said in one voice, "Yes, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like the bee that makes the honey. You have to chase it through the pages of a book." The little girl knew that the promise to read was hers at last. Now, this little girl's name is Trisha, and she's the smallest in her family. She grew up loving books. Her mother was a school teacher, and she read to her every night. Her brother would bring his books home from school, and he would share them. And whenever she went to her grandparents' farm, her grandmother would read to her. When she turned 5 and went to kindergarten, most of all, she wanted to learn how to read. Every day, she looked across the hall and saw the first graders all sitting there reading with their books. And some of the kids in her class started to read, but not Trisha. But she loved being at school because she could draw. The other kids would crowd around her and watch her do magic. "No worry," her brother said, "you'll learn to read in first grade." Now in first grade, Trisha sat in a circle with the other kids. They were all holding a book and sounding out the letters and the words, and the teachers would smile at them when they would put those sounds together and get the word right. But when Trisha looked at the page, all she saw were wiggly shapes, And when she tried to sound out the words, the other kids laughed. "Trisha, what are you looking at in the book?" they would say. "I'm reading," she would say back. But then her teacher would move on to the next person. And whenever it was her turn to read, the teacher would have to sound out every word. Trisha began to feel different. The harder the words got, the more time she spent drawing. When she could, she'd go for walks with her grandmother. And on a summer day, she and her grandmother were walking together in the woods by the farm, and the fireflies were coming up from the grasses. And Trisha said, "Grandma, do you think I'm different?" "Of course," her grandma answered. "To be different is the miracle of life. Do you see all the fireflies? Every one of them is different." "Do you think I'm smart?" Trisha said. Her grandma hugged her. "You are the smartest, quickest, dearest little thing ever." But reading was just plain torture. When the other kids would read their pages, they would do it so easily that Trisha would watch the top of their heads to see if something was happening in there that wasn't happening in hers. And numbers were the hardest thing of all. She never added anything up right. Trisha knew she was different. Then her mother announced that they were moving to California. That was a long way from the family farm in Michigan. And Trisha didn't really want to move, but she thought maybe the teachers and the kids in her new school wouldn't know how different she was. So she and her mother and her brother moved across the country in a two-tone 1949 Plymouth. It took that's old car, isn't it? It took 5 days. But at the new school, it was exactly the same. When she tried to read, she stumbled over the words. And every time her teacher called on her, she gave the wrong answer. A boy named Eric started to call her names on the playground. And Trisha could feel the tears burning in her eyes. She really wished they had stayed back in Michigan. Suddenly, she wanted to go to school less and less. She would say, "I have a sore throat. I have a stomach ache." She dreamed more and more, she drew more and more, and she liked school less and less. Then when she started the 5th grade, the school was all abuzz. There was a new teacher. He was tall, he was elegant. Everybody loved his striped coat and his slick gray pants. He wore the neatest clothes. And Mr. Falker would stand behind Trisha whenever she was drawing, and he would say, "This is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Do you know how talented you are?" When he said this, even the kids who teased her would turn around in their seats and look at her drawings, but they still laughed whenever she gave a wrong answer. Then one day she had to stand up and read. She was stumbling through a page, and the words were all fuzzy when the kids began to laugh out loud, and Mr. Falker in his plaid jacket and his butterfly tie said, "Stop! Are all of you so perfect that you can look at another person and find fault with her?" That was the last day that anybody laughed out loud, all except for Eric. He really seemed to just not like Trisha. He would wait by the door of the classroom and pull her hair, or he would call her names on the playground. And one day, he caught Eric teasing Trisha, and he took him to the principal's office. And he said to Trisha, "You don't need to worry about him teasing you ever again." Mr. Falker would have let her erase the blackboards. Do any of you have blackboards still in your classroom? Do you? Very cool. We have these things called smart boards. You have smart boards? Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like chalkboards. They're a lot less complicated.
We have whiteboards, but they're not hanging up on the wall.
Not hanging on the wall. Well, Trisha was sure that Mr. Falker believed that she could read. She had learned to memorize what the kid next to her was reading, or she would wait for Mr. Falker to help her with a sentence, and then she would say the same thing that he said. Then one day he asked her to stay after school to help with the blackboards. "Let's play a game," he said. "I'm going to shout out letters. You write the letters on the board with a wet sponge as quickly as you can. A, D, M, Q," he shouted. He shouted out letters and numbers, and then he walked up behind her and they looked at the board. It was a watery mess. Tricia knew that none of the letters or the numbers looked like they were supposed to. She threw the sponge down in frustration. Mr. Fokker sank to his knees in front of her. He said, "You don't think you're very smart, do you?" And she sobbed. And he said, "Don't you understand? You don't see letters or numbers the way other people do. You've gotten through school all this time. You fooled many good teachers." He smiled and said, "That took cunning and smartness and bravery." Then he stood up and said, "We're going to change all that. You're going to read, I promise." So every day after school, she met with Mr. Fokker and Miss Plessy, a reading teacher. They did all kinds of things that she didn't understand. They made circles in the sand. They made big circles with wet sponges on the blackboard. She would shout out letters. They would write them down. But then she still wasn't feeling like she could do it. One day, about 3 months later, Mr. Fokker put a book in front of her, one she'd never seen before. He pointed to the middle of the page, and almost as if it were magic, the sentences started to take shape on the page like they never had before. She read one sentence, another, and another, finally the whole page, and she understood the whole thing. That night, she ran home without stopping to catch her breath. She bounded up the front steps, she threw open the front door, and she ran to the cupboard and grabbed a jar of honey. She went into the living room and found that book on the shelf, the very one that Grandpa had shown her many years ago. She spooned honey on the cover and tasted the sweetness and said, "Honey is sweet, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like the bee who makes the honey. It has to be chased through the pages of a book." Then she held the book, honey and all, and felt the tears rolling down her cheeks. This time, they were happy tears. The rest of that year was all about discovery and adventure. Tricia learned to love school. And she says, "I know this because that little girl was me, Patricia Polacco. I saw Mr. Fokker 30 years later at a wedding. I walked up to him and introduced myself, and at first he didn't remember me. Then I told him who I was and how he had changed my life. He hugged me and asked what I did for a living. 'Why, Mr. Fokker,' I said, 'I write books for children.' 'Thank you, Mr. Fokker, thank you.'" So, that's a story about a guide in one person's life. This week, in case you don't know, is also Teacher Appreciation Week. So this week, think about Mr. Fokker and think about one way to thank all of those teachers in your lives. Thanks for being such great listeners. We're going to rise in all the ways we do. We're going to sing you out with hymn number 124.
You may be seated. My task this morning is to introduce you and invite you into a journey through our new theme for this month, curiosity, and in preparation for more exploration of exemplars and gurus with Reverend Kelly in a few minutes. I thought about my own pathway towards the wisdom of exemplars and gurus, and I realized that that foundation was set from some of my earliest memories of a child connecting with the world around me. And there were many ways that that connection began. It certainly began in the ways that significant adults in my life would take time with me to read to me. And a lot of those books opened my imagination. Books like Where the Wild Things Are and Harold and the Purple Crayon really began to help my young mind percolate with possibility. But given the era that I grew up, it is essential to admit that, along with many of the people in my particular generation, one of the pathways to knowing the world and discovering new ideas, for better or worse, was television. The thing is, I grew up in a time that was a particularly interesting and significant time in the history of television. It was a time when television was interested in exploring the larger world. It tried to bring new realities into the living room of the American people. And my family participated in that ritual at least twice a week. We would gather for at least 2 shows as an entire family. And there was significance to those 2 shows in terms of my own understanding and my connection with my family. Because every week we would gather to watch All in the Family, which was one of many Norman Lear humanistic and humanitarian visions where television invited us to open our minds and hearts to the human truth of the world around us. And secondly, every week we would gather to watch the show MASH together. Over the years of watching how those characters changed both in their own inner life and how they connected with the power of the war around them, all of those things began to do their work in me. Long before I was mature enough yet to realize the wisdom of the actual human beings like my family and friends around me, television was one way that I began to see the world and to try to understand experiences outside of what I had already known in my life. And what began to happen was a surprisingly meaningful journey into the world, and within me, a budding sense of boundless curiosity. So much so that the little geek that I was, when I was bored at home, I would ask my parents to assign me a book report, which I would carefully research in the World Book encyclopedias that we owned, and then I would present my report to my family, which I am sure they loved so much. As I moved into high school, I found myself actually struggling with that childhood wonder. That was an important moment of truth for me. Because the combination of adolescence, of a sort of cultural elitism, and a consumerism that made me really want to have the world prove to me that it was worthy of my time and attention, found me dampening my curiosity by thinking that ideas needed to be smart enough, new enough, interesting enough for them to really be worthy of my energy. But the truth is that often those ideas that did not bubble up as being quite so exciting were exactly the ideas that I needed. Often what they did actually was invite me outside of the comfort of the world that I had come to know and love. So in college, in graduate school, I would read books by Mary Daly. I would explore history as illuminated by Howard Zinn. Daniel Quinn's Ishmael opened my perspective beyond seeing human beings as the center of the mythology of the world. And even gatherings like the Mudflower Collective, a group of multiracial women who began the idea that the way to think about theology was not one person sitting alone, but people being in deeper conversation with each other. And rather than avoiding the difficulties of race and gender and sexuality, letting that dynamic tension teach you about the world. Over and over again, I found that curiosity invited me to encounter ideas that made me uncomfortable. Nowadays, I find myself curious about the new ways that I can imagine and engage my world. What it really feels like to be curious in my body and in my spirit as well as my mind. How deeply interconnected they all are. How curiosity again and again calls me back to the world in both joyful and uncomfortable ways. How it asks me again and again to really show up with less judgment and more curiosity. So as we move into this month, I invite you to let Janine Roth's words think within you, live within you, invite you to a place of curiosity. In her thinking about our relationship with food, she wrote this, but I believe ultimately it invites us to a way of living. Our work is not so much to change what we do, but to witness what we do with enough awareness, enough curiosity, enough tenderness that lies in old decisions upon which our compulsions, our illusions, our divisions are based, so that they become apparent for what they really are and fall away. How is curiosity alive in your whole being? How in this month can you bring it more into your life and let it do its work? I invite you to explore that with us as we journey through these days.
Today's anthem is an interfaith anthem commissioned for the inaugural ceremonies of the Council for Parliament of the World's Religions, held on the campus of the University of Chicago in 1989. The event marked the opening of a series of interfaith services, conferences, and other activities designed to prepare for the centennial observance of the 1893 World's Parliament of Religions, planned for Chicago in the summer of 1993. The text is by Rabbi Herbert Bronstein and Ron King. When I turn to face you, it's your turn to sing. So have your insert at the ready, please. Spirit of first, the breath of life praises, the teachings live, our way together is a way of life. Spirit of first, the breath of life praises, the teachings live, our way together flash of tyranny. Together we strive against all servitude from within and from without, that all may be free to serve all people and all creatures of the earth.
Many thanks to our Meeting House Chorus for that beautiful piece. Someone new has recently entered my family's life and is already having a deep impact. She is a petite woman from Japan, whom we will most likely never meet, and she has begun the latest craze in home organization. When she entered our lives, I was skeptical, yet my children were enthralled. My position quickly changed when the two of them began planning how they would reorganize their room. finding all the items they could part with, things that were no longer bringing them joy. What parent wouldn't appreciate two children wanting to clean and organize of their own free will? You may have figured out that I am talking about Marie Kondo, founder of the KonMari method of home organization. Her method is not just about letting go of stuff. It's about how lives can be transformed when you take the time to discover what holds meaning for you, what is important to you, what captivates you and brings you joy. When I met with Alan and Joy Knox about the sermon topic of their choice, one at last year's Cabaret auction, I heard them say they were interested in the exemplars and guides in my life. Who are those who help me create meaning? Who are the ones who guide me? And what I heard in my head was Marie Kondo's voice asking, who and what helps you to find joy? Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was the first to come to mind, a 19th and 20th century author, activist, and member of the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia. When I was an intern in that congregation, there was a large banner hanging in their sanctuary bearing her picture and the words, "We are all bound up together." An African-American woman born to free parents in Baltimore in 1825. She spent much of her youth devoted to abolishing slavery. Her work as a lecturer and author was infused with a liberation theology that addressed what we today would call the intersectionality of justice work. She would describe the connections among all oppressions as the reality that we are all bound up together. When the Civil War ended, Harper waged a dual campaign for women's suffrage and civil rights for all. In May of 1866, she delivered an address to the National Women's Rights Convention in New York, saying before thousands, "Justice is not fulfilled so long as woman is unequal before the law. We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul." Harper's vision continues to resonate with scholars, feminists, and Unitarian Universalists. In 2011, scholars gathered in Philadelphia to honor the 100th anniversary of her death. The Professor Melba Joyce Boyd, one of the panelists at the celebration, said that Harper's insight, developed during an era rife with violent enforcement of racism, sexism, and classism, constitutes a viable ideological framework for contemporary radical thought. What I hold on to from Harper's life is that she called on people of faith to resist the status quo and embrace a radical liberatory theology that knows we are not free until all are free. In the present climate of our own day, her words still carry weight. She was also a poet. This is one of my favorites, called Songs for the People. Let me make songs for the people, songs for the old and young, songs to stir like a battle cry wherever they are sung. Not for the clashing of sabers, for carnage, nor for strife, but songs to thrill the hearts of all with more abundant life. Let me make songs for the weary amid life's fever and fret, till hearts shall relax their tension and careworn brows can forget. Let me sing for little children before their footsteps stray, sweet anthems of love and duty to float o'er their highway. I would sing for the poor and the aged when shadows dim their sight, of bright and restful mansions where there shall be no night. Our world so worn and weary needs music pure and strong to hush the jangle and discord of sorrow, pain, and wrong. Music to soothe all the sorrow, till war and crime shall cease, and the hearts of all grow tender. Until then, girdle this world with peace. Now, the next teacher and author, a person who's taught me how to find peace even amidst difficulty, is Sharon Salzberg. She's the one who's helped my heart grow more tender. She believes we can each connect to the happiness and equanimity within us through a spiritual practice known as loving kindness. This is an orientation of boundless goodwill towards yourself and all life. This compassion allows you to let go of any resistance or rejection of difficult people or challenging situations. It's an attitude of cherishing all living beings as if they are your own children, radiating a friendliness for the whole world without limit. This is, of course, easier said than done. Loving kindness is developed through a practice where you wish safety, health, well-being, first to yourself, then to a mentor or teacher, someone very easy for you to love, then a person with whom you have difficulty, and finally, to the whole world. Once again, in recognition of our interdependence. According to Sharon Salzberg, our daily behaviors create a field into which we plant the seeds of our practice and ultimately our lives. If we are cultivating loving kindness in our actions, the field then that we're preparing becomes an ideal space for growth. On the other hand, if we're yelling at our kids or our coworkers, if we're mean to the dog, if we lose our patience in traffic, she says, it doesn't matter how many hours long your meditation practice is. You will not be able to create a space of loving kindness. A field of goodness cannot be planted in isolation. To become a loving, peaceful, and joyful person, she says we need to cultivate love and peace and joy in all the aspects of our lives. Everything's connected to everything else. We are all bound up together. This loving kindness practice has been difficult for me of late, mainly when I get to this last part of sending loving kindness to the whole world. I struggle when I'm sending loving kindness to the planet itself. It's not difficult to send the love, but it's difficult to sit with the pain that arises. This brings me to my third teacher, the eco-theologian Joanna Macy. I turn to Joanna when I have the heaviest of hearts. Her words help me to remember that deep interconnectedness, to remember that no one's free until we are all free, to remember that we must love each and every one of us, and to remember her words when it feels really hard. There's no way to tell, she says, how our larger story will end. So we learn again that hardest and most rewarding of lessons, how to make friends with uncertainty. How to pour your whole passion into a project when you cannot be sure it's going to work. How to free yourself from dependence on seeing the results of your actions. We can't know how things will unfold, but what we can do is make a choice about what we would like to have happen, and then put ourselves fully behind that possibility. What I find so compelling in her work is this integration of science and spirit, activism and meditation, urgency and calm, grief and hope. She is keenly aware of what is at stake for life on earth. There's a steadiness about her, a balance that prevents burnout without giving up the dedication to her mission. She knows that we may not see the changes we want to have happen, and we may not be able to reverse the trajectory we are on. But she also knows that we must carry on and do what we can while we can. What I've learned from her, what I find so compelling, is the way that she builds the work. The fact that it starts with gratitude, because gratitude builds trust and resilience. Gratitude widens our perspective and strengthens us to face the difficulties. This strength through gratitude allows us to then honor that pain we hold for the world. It allows space for the expression of feelings, sorrow, grief, outrage. As Joanna says, this suffering with the world is the most natural thing. It is wholesome and it is healthy. She says, do not be afraid of your heart breaking open. For the heart that breaks open can hold the whole universe. It is that big. The breaking open allows us to see with new eyes, giving us a new perspective, a wider sense of self, a richer experience of community. It creates the recognition that we are indeed all bound up together. And then we go forth, envisioning the future we hope for and identifying the practical steps that help us get there. These three, Frances Allen Watkins Harper, Sharon Salzberg, and Joanna Macy, they bring me hope. They help me find ways to face the mess that is our world today. They're where I go to get refreshed and renewed. They ground me. They help me find my center. Who or what is it for you? Perhaps there are people who serve these roles in your life. Perhaps it is poetry, music, yoga, swimming, hugging a tree, hugging a child, digging in the good earth. Seek that which connects you to something larger than yourself, that connects you to this interdependent web, to the love that is everywhere and in everything. Hanging on my wall are the words that I have summed up from these three teachers. I leave you with them today. Love more. Breathe deep. Remember, we are all bound up together. You don't need to do everything. Do what calls your heart. Effective action comes from love. It is unstoppable, and it is enough.
Now for a moment, as we invite the cares of the congregation to be fully present, may we do so by becoming aware of our breath, letting our breath be an invitation to this moment. As we breathe in, may we breathe in a peace that holds the full truth of our lives, both the joys and the sorrows. And as we breathe out, may we breathe out love, a love that offers healing in our own lives, in the lives of people that we love, in the larger life. From this life-giving space of breath and presence, love and peace, this week, we remember Bill Schuler, husband of Nancy Schuler and father of Michael Schuler, who passed away on Friday, April 26th. We send the Schuler family our love and support as they grieve his passing. We share the sorrow of Judy Troya and her family as they mourn the loss of Karen Stark, Judy's daughter-in-law. Karen's creative, warm, and beautiful spirit will be deeply missed by all who loved her. We join with the Bollard Millar clan in Madison, asking for kind thoughts and prayers as Jill struggles with the letting go of her father in Florida and her father's letting go. Jill's health and quality of life are compromised in that process. We hold them in our thoughts and prayers. In all that we are, in the ways that we are connected, in the gift of our life together, we hold each other in care, knowing that we are called, each in our own way, to remember and to act in love. May that truth hold us in these days. Amen, and blessed be. As we move into our time of offering, may we know that our outreach offering recipient is the Outreach LGBT Community Center. You may find out more information about their work in the red floors. As our offering is given and received, may it be so in a spirit of abundance and life.
As part of our services this weekend, we are welcoming all those who have officially joined First Unitarian Society over the past year. This worshiping community has a long and distinguished history, and we are happy to welcome all those who've chosen to join their journey with ours.
Becoming a member in this congregation is, on one hand, a fairly straightforward proposition. One attends a new Unitarian Universalist course, signifies their intent to join, is familiar with our UU principles and the bond of union, which holds us together in community. And then they enter their name in the membership book, and in some ways, that is all there is to it. But some have asked, why would someone want to do this?
We join this congregation because we believe that the promotion of liberal religious values will make a difference in the world, that a strong Unitarian Universalist movement will help make our community and the planet a more peaceful and compassionate place. We make this commitment because we believe in the transformative power of our communities and this faith tradition.
We join because we want to be part of a community that causes us to examine and re-examine ourselves, our families, our world on an ethical and moral level, and also to walk with us on our own personal spiritual journeys.
We join because we hunger to be in relationship with others who see religion as an open-ended, ongoing quest for deeper meaning and more honest and authentic connection.
So this is not a casual commitment we ask people to make. And that is why we take time today to recognize and celebrate those who have made this commitment. Our hope is that the experience of membership here will be an experience of abundance and joy in many ways for you on your spiritual journey. So again, we welcome you to membership in the First Unitarian Society.
As I read your name, please join us at the front of the sanctuary. If we missed your name, you are here to be recognized. Please join us. Please bring your insert with you. These two people are very special to me, so this is wonderful. Haben Goyim and Christopher Schmidtka.
Is that it? Okay. Here, if you can. Hello.
Good morning. As a member of the Board of Trustees, I'm pleased to welcome you to this congregation. If you will please refer to your insert for this responsive reading. To the new members, do you accept the responsibilities and freedoms associated with membership in this Unitarian Universalist congregation? Do you promise to support this religious community with your words, your time, and your substance? We do. Are you willing to join the members of the First Unitarian Society in a common quest for religious and spiritual understanding, and for the common purpose of living reverent and compassionate lives? We are. And to the congregation, do you accept these people into this community as companions in the spiritual journey? Do you pledge to rejoice with them in times of happiness, to grieve with them in times of sorrow, and to share with them all the blessings of our free faith?
We do.
And let us join together in the words of the continuing bond of union.
We, the members of the First Unitarian Society of Madison, desiring a religious organization in the spirit of Jesus of Nazareth, which shall make the integrity of life its first aim and leave thought free, associate ourselves together, and accept to our membership those of whatever theological opinion who wish to unite with us in the promotion of truth, righteousness, reverence, and charity among all. The right hand of fellowship is now offered to our new members. A custom dating back to Puritan times, the hand of fellowship is a sign of acceptance and equality. We also give them flowers, symbols of the welcome and the beauty we hope they find in this community. If you will join me in welcoming our new members. Christopher, welcome. Welcome. And we will rise in all the ways we do, and our closing hymn is number 105.
If you'll join us in the first and last verse of that hymn, please.
From age to age, how grandly rise the prophets' souls in line. Above the passing centuries, like beacon lights they shine. Like beacon lights they shine. Verse 4, please. Through every race, in every clime, one song shall yet be heard. Move onward in thy course sublime, O everlasting word. O everlasting word.
Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms or books in a very foreign tongue. Do not seek the answers which cannot be given you. The point is to live everything, live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without even noticing, live along some distant day into the answer. We extinguish this chalice flame, but not the warmth of love, the fire of justice, or the passion of this community. These we hold within us until we gather again. Blessed be, go in peace, and please be seated for one more gift of music.